and players mob him.
But Michael Jordan is not only the best basketball player, but he's the most exciting basketball player to ever play.
Tatum fires away, pumps it in, 51 for Jason Tatum.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Big Three NBA Podcast. I am Sherrod Blakely, joined by Gary Washburn, and we have, I guess, is it load management? Is it late game scratch? How do we describe not having Quantity, Gary? How would you describe it?
Yeah, late game scratch, back spasms, or knee soreness, however you want to paraphrase it. Yes.
Yeah, it's not a non-COVID illness or COVID illness. It was not. We're not sick. She's not sick. She just ain't in the building today. But me and G Money, we here to hold it down. And before we get into this, this episode of the Big Three NBA Podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks, exclusive daily fantasy partner of CLNS Media Network. Sign up now at prizepicks.com/CLNS and use code CLNS and win up to 1,000 times your cash. They're coming strong now, 1,000 times your cash. And another special shout out to our good friends at Game Time, which takes the guesswork out of buying last-minute tickets to your favorite sporting events. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, Gary, it's been kind of a slow week for you and me and pretty much everyone in the association, all except for a handful of teams. We just finished the Emirates NBA Cup. Milwaukee with the beat down on OKC, 97-81. Giannis had a triple-double with 26, 19 boards, 10 assists. And that Milwaukee defense, we ain't seen defense like that in Milwaukee in a while, holding a really high-scoring OKC team to just about 33, 34% shooting. SGA had 21 points, but he did it on 24 shots, not the most efficient game he's had. So from your take, Gary, I mean, what does this mean to the NBA pecking order? Because it seems like the Milwaukee Bucks, they're trending in the right direction after just an absolute horrendous start to the season.
Yeah, I think that they're starting to play better. They're getting contributions from the guys that had not been given them much early in the season. Brook Lopez, Gary Trent Jr., Bobby Portis. Doc has figured out how to use Andre Jackson as mostly a defender, where he can, contribute on that side of the ball, but he doesn't need to score. So you put lineups around him that ensures that he doesn't need to shoot the ball a lot. And so they're playing together. And the question is, when you ask, and remember, Sherrod, they won last night without Chris Middleton. He was sick. So they won essentially without their third best player. So they're a team to watch. Obviously, they're an older team. They're going to need some real contributions. The kid, AJ Green, is a great shooter. He's coming through and playing well for them. They're getting contributions from those young guys, and that's important. And that's what they need, because Brook Lopez, 36-37. Middleton's often injured. Bobby Portis is on the back nine of his career. Dame is 35, about to be 35. So, you need help from the young guys, and that's what they're getting. And Doc, and as much as, Doc gets criticism, because he didn't get it done in LA and he got fired in Philadelphia. And I know it's been a while since Doc's been to the mountaintop, obviously 16 years, but the man can still coach, right? He can still put together lineups. He can still motivate. He can still put together a team that's going to compete. And this isn't Philadelphia where he's dealing with Embiid. Today I want to play. Tomorrow I don't want to play.
Damn, Gary, that's a pretty good Joel Embiid impersonation. Well done.
He's dealing with James Harden. Well, if I ain't scoring 30 with 15, 20 assists and I'm not getting the ball a lot, I'm gonna go to the club then. So he's not dealing with those guys. He's dealing with Giannis, who is one of the harder workers in the league. We don't ever hear Giannis taking time off. He'll get hurt every now and then, but he's a baller. And then Dame still has game left. Dame might not be the Dame he was 6-7 years ago when he was in his prime, but Dame can still drop 30, hit the threes, run the show. And then you got Middleton, other guys helping. So he is putting together a team that might not be as healthy and rugged and ready to go in May because of that long season. But in December, they're turning into a quality team. And I mean, besides Cleveland and Boston, they could be the third best team. I still don't trust the Knicks. The Knicks lost at home to Atlanta. The Knicks are, we can talk about the Knicks and what they're doing, but the Knicks, they're 16-10. They ain't doing much for me. And as bad as Milwaukee has been, Milwaukee's a game and a half back, 14-11.
Yeah.
So to me, the Bucks are upcoming. Now the Bucks are still 4-7 on the road. They've got a difficult game with Cleveland on Friday, so we'll see how that goes. But for now, the Bucks are nothing to mess with. And remember, they don't play the Celtics again this season, so the Celtics would not see them until potentially the first, second, or even the conference finals.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you about, because, I mean, the Celtics, even if the Celtics didn't have the best record in the NBA, they would still be the team that everyone is focusing on. What do you think that Milwaukee has done to close that gap, if at all? Like, what are they doing better now that we didn't see in those first 10 games?
Well, shots are going down, Sherrod. First of all, Brook Lopez hitting threes. Gary Trent, when the Celtics saw them, those guys are not playing well. Brook Lopez was off to a horrible start. Bobby Portis was off to a horrible start. Gary Trent, all three of those guys got off to horrible starts. And Dame did not get off to a great start. So now all those guys are starting to knock down shots. So they're hitting threes. And then they're getting contributions. AJ Green's a guy who's he's kind of the Bucks version of Sam Hauser. And that guy is a shooter. Like, you look at him, you say shooter. When you see him get the ball, he can shoot with contests. He can shoot, coming up the floor off the dribble. He can shoot off the break. Whatever you ask him to do, he can shoot. He's a shooter. Gary Trent Jr. has always been a player who you see like a guy who could maybe be a fringe all-star, over the years, but something just ain't quite there. But he's starting to play that guy who can defend, hit the three, hit the mid-range. You see it. You've seen it over the years. He's had some real stretches in his career where you're like, man, that guy's gonna be a guy who could maybe make an all-star team. I'm not talking about being a perennial all-star. I'm talking about like 1 year, have a career year. And it just doesn't happen. And literally, as you saw, Sherrod, he was out here this summer looking for work. Like, he signed a minimum deal. He thought he was going to get $15-20 million a year, and he got minimum to play for the Bucks to kind of a show it deal. So obviously this is unless Milwaukee brings him back and they got cap space or something, he's probably his only year in Milwaukee, but he's showing that he's a capable player. So I think, Sherrod, the young guys have stepped up and played well. But the thing you got to worry about with Milwaukee is the depth. Like, they don't have a deep bench. You got guys like Taurean Prince who are okay, but you don't have that depth. You don't have that youth. So you wonder whether down the road they're going to wear out. But I think from the Milwaukee team that we saw that came in a couple of weeks ago, that didn't play all that well, but that, Chris Middleton's first game back, I thought, they're getting better from the time, and they've pushed the Celtics in all those three meetings. They're all competitive games. They were up, 15, 20 points in the first half of the game at Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. But I think that they're just getting help from guys who were supposed to help, but at the beginning did not help.
Yeah. One of the things that Giannis was talking about after they won the Emirates Cup the other night was how, after that last loss to the Celtics, him and Dame really just basically said, we got to dig us out of this malaise we're in. And they've been a much better team since then. When you look at where they are, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, Cleveland and Boston pretty much separate themselves from the rest of the Eastern Conference. I think it's fair to say at this point. Then you've got this cluster of teams, that are kind of jockeying for who's next. And Milwaukee is among those teams. Where do you see the pecking order, like maybe the next 3 or 4 teams after Boston and Cleveland? Because again, Boston and Cleveland, they in their own building. They got their own. They paying rent. And they in a penthouse suite. Everyone else is trying to get them a studio apartment. They got the penthouse joints. Who is next Who's that next 4?
Okay. I'm going to go with the Bucks, obviously.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks now, nothing to play with. They have gotten it together. They didn't play well in that semifinal game against the Bucks, but they're a team that's beaten the Celtics. They beat the Cavaliers twice, and they beat the Knicks. So, and they won at Milwaukee. So they can beat. They're capable of beating anybody, right? So I'm gonna say the Bucks. I'm gonna say the Knicks. I'm gonna say the Hawks, and I'm gonna give those Orlando Magic when they get healthy. Now it could be a while. Banchero, I heard he's not close to coming back. We'll see the team that they field in a couple of days when the Celtics go down there and play a couple of days before Christmas. And then Wagner is also out. But when they get completely healthy, they're going to be a factor. The other teams, Sherrod, like I said, the Heat, I don't know. The Heat starting to play better. You just don't know. They lost again to your Pistons. Another close game to the Pistons. The Heat, I just don't see it. I think they got to make a deal. And then, as you saw, Sherrod, that Jimmy Butler thing is starting to start looming larger and larger as we get toward the trade deadline. And I think it's February 8th or February 10th, something like that. Whatever the trade deadline is, it's getting larger and larger because there are teams interested in Jimmy. He's the final year of his contract. He's got to opt out so he can be a free agent this summer. And do the Heat feel like they're going to bring him back long term? Do you let him go after this season with nothing in return, or you try to get assets? How important is Jimmy Butler to the Miami Heat? And do the Heat feel like but Jimmy is about his money, as we all know. And so Jimmy's not going to sign one of them cap-friendly Al Horford deals, right? He
ain't that dude.
No, he ain't coming back for 2 years, $40 million. That ain't Jimmy, right? He's not doing that. Well, as long as you'll have me. No. He won his chippers. So he won his chippers. So this will be a fascinating thing. So I'm going to say Atlanta. I'm going to say New York. I'm going to say New York, Orlando, and what's the other team? 4 teams. New York, Orlando, Milwaukee, and Atlanta. Those are the 4 teams. Miami, can't call it. Indiana, really inconsistent, terrible road team. Already 11 road losses.
Right.
Like, you can't play well away from home. You're not going to win. They're one of the worst road records of a playoff caliber team in the league. 11 road losses. And the Bulls, and Sherrod, your Pistons are 10th. And with Brooklyn trading Dennis Schroeder, the Pistons have a play-in shot. Like Philadelphia is the team that could take that spot, right? Philadelphia, we don't know what's going to happen with your friend Joel Embiid. Paul George is starting to hoop. They won at Charlotte. I thought it was a disappointing loss for Charlotte because Charlotte, it's about time Charlotte start winning some of these games against teams that are just like them. They lost again at home. They're, I think you could throw Charlotte out of the play-in situation. I think Toronto, they're only 7-20. They're out of it. I would say they're not going to make a run. And we all know about, Sherrod, your favorite team, the Washington Wizards. They're done. So if you're Detroit, you got a shot to make the play-in. You got to, and they can do some damage. So I'm not talking about in the play-in. I'm just talking about during the season and trying to make the playoffs. So, I don't know about that. I said Philadelphia, Embiid might not be available for the Christmas game because he's got that facial fracture.
Right.
We don't know. There's still 8 games under 500. And, obviously, if you win 8 in a row, you're still at 500. So they're going to be teetering on 500 all year. I mean, unless they go on a real impressive streak. So the rest of the East, I got nothing for it. The Celtics should cruise against these teams. But I think Milwaukee, Atlanta, New York, and Orlando are behind Cleveland are those teams that should fill in those 6 spots, along with the Celtics and Cavs.
Yeah, there's to me the East is really there's 3 levels. There's like the folks who basically they got their application to get in the building and it's still being reviewed. Folks, they hope that credit score gonna get them in. I don't know if it's gonna get them in. And then you got teams that are a notch below the Celtics in Cleveland. And again, my pecking order right now is I think Milwaukee is clearly the third best team in the Eastern Conference right now. When you look at them, not only their ability to win, but how they're doing it. They're getting after it defensively. Giannis is playing at an MVP level. Dame looks more like the Dame of old than just an old Dame. And then you start looking at just the job that Doc is doing. And we can talk a bit more about him later. But Doc is doing a lot of those little things that people don't recognize that he does. For example, when you look at them in huddles now, you see some of the young guys who are playing roles that they're not used to playing near the huddles, even though they're not going to game. Very similar to what we saw in Boston with Avery Bradley. Avery Bradley was always in a huddle, even when he wasn't playing. You start to see some of that stuff play out in Milwaukee now, and Doc has a lot to do with that type of stuff and just the impact that makes. So to me, Milwaukee's clearly the third best team. Fourth best team, I think, is the Hawks. And to be honest with you, Gary, I would not be shocked if that flips. And I say that only because Trae Young has figured out the cheat code for how to be really good and not be just a bucket getter. We know he can do that, but he's not only getting dimes, he's getting dimes that matter. His team's actually winning games because you know that there's a lot of guys that have them. I call like those soft drink stat lines where they'll have like 9 assists and they'll get like 5 of them after this team is down by like 25, and the line looks better than the actual play was. Trae Young ain't doing that as much anymore. I mean, he's actually got guys around him that actually know how to play off of him and are allowing him to not only still get his points, but also allow this team to be more successful. So I look at them as that number 4 team. And number 5, even though they don't have their big guy in Banchero, I still look at Orlando ahead of New York right now because Orlando is finding ways to win with a less than complete squad. And the idea that they're going to be even better when they have their full complement of players is very real. And frankly, it should be expected. And New York, to me, has been like, other than Philadelphia, New York has been probably the biggest disappointment for me this year. I expected them to be a little bit more competitive out the gate, especially considering that they haven't had significant major injuries, and they added an all-star in Karl Anthony Towns. But I think what we're also missing from that team is the impact that DiVincenzo made on that squad. And the fact that Mikal Bridges has been all right, but considering what they gave up to get him, he's been a bit of a disappointment too. So that to me is the top 6. And after that, you got teams that are just hoping they can get a studio apartment in the spot. They're not trying to be in a penthouse with Boston. They're not trying to live, in a nice little 2-3 bedroom like New York and all them others. They just hope they can get a studio in the playoffs. Just get a taste of it. I like Detroit, even though they still, I think, have some clear flaws. They play hard, and they have the right kind of coach to get them back into the postseason. To me, they have a coach who is a great, what I like to call starter kit coach. He can get you basically in the mix to just be in the playoffs. And you're not going to do much more beyond that. I just don't think I don't think that's just who he is. So the Pistons, I think, are going to be a team. Indiana has been a big disappointment. As you pointed out, you would have thought that team was going to be top 3, top 4, just the way they seemed to get better and better last season. The fact that they brought pretty much, everyone from the band back together. They've been a major disappointment. And after that, I ain't paying attention to nobody. Miami, they're to me, Miami is just like right on the fringe of just taking a absolutely catastrophic drop. 1, because of their play. 2, because of Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is that really good player that has an expiration date with every franchise, and I think we're starting to see him come and creep up on that. It seems everywhere he's been, there was a point in time where it's like maybe we should just be friends. The breakup. And he's kind of in that breakup zone right now where maybe we should just part ways. And I think Miami, between now and the trade deadline, I think they're going to embrace that and just move on from him. Because as you pointed out, Gary, that brother is about that paper. And I just don't see them willing to come up off the kind of money that Jimmy's going to be looking for right now. And so it might be in his best interest to move on to another spot. A team that could, use a player that with his type of skills, his talent, and obviously his leadership skills, but do it with the understanding that this is only going to be a short time thing. This is only going to be like a 3, maybe 4-year process, probably more like 3 at best. And so that'll work for him. But I'm real curious, like you are, to see what happens with Jimmy, because I do think that his situation is going to really It's going to dictate in many ways the way the whole trade deadline. I think that might be the first significant chip to be moved between now and the trade deadline.
Yeah. I mean, I said, I think he would like to stay in Miami, but I think Miami is obviously an organization that feels like, listen, like Spo will be honest, is this a team that can make a run for the NBA Finals? And he worked miracles a couple of years ago with that team that beat the Celtics, and Caleb Martin was playing like Kobe, and they got all, Gabe Vincent was balling. Well,
and they all got paid too.
Yeah, and those guys are gone. I mean, those guys are gone. Tyler Hero is the leading scorer. He's the A guy now. Bam Adebayo having a solid year, but not a spectacular year. And they just can't, Terry Rozier has kind of turned into just a guy there. I thought he would be a real big addition for them. A guy who's got, we all know how tough he is, and he loves to hoop. And I said he's averaging, 11 points a game, 11.7 points a game. He's not having a great season. 39% from the field, 35 from three. There's not a lot of. Jaime Jaquez has really been terrible. I mean, that's terrible. 8.8 points, shooting 42% from the field, 25 from three. Like he has not taken that next step. I think people expected him to take that next step, that next major step, and be a guy who could be maybe the second or third leading scorer on this team. No, he is the sixth leading scorer on this team, behind Duncan Robinson, behind Rozier, Adebayo, Butler, and Hero. So Miami, they play hard. They're well coached, but you just got to think, like, when's it time to kind of throw in the towel on this core? And another guy I thought, and then we talked about this, Sherrod, that I saw him in Summer League, and I thought he was going to start at the center and be a real factor, was Khalil Ware, because we saw him against Neemias Queta, and he dominated Queta in that game, and that was his first NBA game. And I'm like, oh, this dude is going to be a difference maker for Miami. He has just not been able to get on the court. I think that's been a definite disappointment if you're talking about players. So you're right, Sherrod. Like, I think Miami plays hard. They got a lot of guys who are into that system, but it's just sort of like how good can they be?
Right.
And I think what Pat Riley and Spo will do was assess this roster and go, okay, how far can we go? Is it worth keeping Jimmy, or is it worth getting assets? And I know Pat Riley is pushing 80. He wants to see one final championship run. Who do you bring in to try to put this team over the top? Adebayo, a great player, averaging 16 and 10, not eye-poppy numbers, but solid numbers. Nothing that you're gonna, it's gonna, make you do backflips. He's only shooting 44% from the field for a big. That's not good. Butler's been good, but Butler hasn't always been on the floor. And then Hero is averaging a career-high 24 points a game, shooting 41 from three, 48 from the field. So he's had a really good season. He's all-star caliber. Mm-hmm. But you look at the rest of the guys, Josh Richardson can't get on the court, never, always hurt now. Kevin Love is 36 years old. Haywood Highsmith, solid player, but just mostly a defender. Nikola Jovic, always in the doghouse. So Jaime Jaquez, we talked about just not having that good sophomore season. So what do you do with Miami? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Before we go any further, I want to make sure we shout out to our good friends at Prize Picks, which is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made it daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. And if you join now, because the holiday season is right upon us, Prize Picks is giving away a couple free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during the holidays called Picksmas. You like that, Gary? I know you do. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday each Tuesday. PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Just sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, again, is the best way to win real money this basketball season. You look at which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. And here's what you do. Again, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Now, speaking of running their games, Giannis Antetokounmpo was just absolutely crushing it in that damn, the Emirates NBA Cup. Now, here's the thing about Giannis. I mean, this is a guy who has already won the MVP award, Gary. We know that. But where does he stack up now? I mean, do you put him at the front of that pack, or is he still kind of in that top 3, top 4, top 5 zone?
I still think you got to give it to Jokic as the best player in the league. I think Giannis is moving up to number 2. Luka's had an injury-prone season, and the Mavericks have been okay. But not great as we know. I mean, so I think Giannis is moving up, and I just think he's in his prime. He's 30 years old. He is doing amazing things, and we all know he plays when he can play. He plays every game. He plays hard. He's never developed that great outside jumper that people were saying. Well, if he gets a J, it's over. But he still, is unstoppable at the rim. He rebounds. He plays defense. That he had a great block shot the other night on SGA near the rim. It was like, hey man, don't even try to come over here with this stuff. And I think he's moved to that one or two role. Jokic is still the guy, just averaging triple-double, just the guy who's just indispensable. You can't, Denver needs him on the floor at all times. And if you're Denver, is what we're hearing is that they're trying to get him some help because the Nuggets are only 14-10. They're just an average team right now, 5.5 back in the West, and Jamal Murray hasn't played very well this year. Michael Porter Jr. has never really developed into that all-star caliber player that I think people have envisioned. So I think it might be time to make a move and get him a solid, dependable number 2 guy for Jokic. So I think Giannis has moved his way up, and I just think this was a great spotlight for him. He is, like I said, he's an incredible player. I mean, he's a player that I think like a LeBron James and like a lot of these guys, but when he calls it quits, we're going to really miss him because they're just we have not seen a player like him before him. Mm-hmm. And we won't see a player like him since. Again, just the physical freak that he is. We can talk about Wemby and all that. Wemby ain't turning into Giannis physically. Wemby might be just a bunch of guy who can still feel the stats, but Giannis. I mean, what a 30. He's having 33 a game, almost 12 rebounds and 6 assists. Yeah, I mean, just an incredible player. So yeah, I mean, and add to that 1.6 blocks. You gotta love him, man. You gotta admire him. I just don't know he got into it with Jalen. He's kind of he can be a clown at times and stuff, but man, the way that guy plays ball, you gotta love it.
I tell you what, Gary, I put Giannis at the top of the list ahead of Jokic, and here's why. First of all, Giannis is a phenomenal player. He's been on this mountaintop before, and he's even better now. The thing about Giannis that I find that has really allowed a guy who is already pretty damn dominant to be even more dominant is his playmaking now. I mean, he is making some passes that I don't know if he would have even contemplated making them a year or two ago, let alone actually execute them flawlessly now. His ability to dribble drive, get into the paint and suck the defense in and know where his shooters are going to be and get them the ball in rhythm without locking in on it, without being predictable in his passing game. That to me is phenomenal. And his scoring is, again, at an elite level. And he's an example of what I think sometimes happens. When we look at players, we tend to focus on what they don't do well and use that as a justification for why they're not going to be great or why they're not as great as they could be. When we really should begin to understand and focus more on what do they do well, and are they doing it well enough to where it stands out among others? Like the NBA is full of some of the most phenomenal athletes that you will find in any sport. And yet more nights than not, Giannis makes these phenomenal athletes look average or below average with his ability to beat them off the dribble, his ability to finish at the rim, and just his defense and his playmaking. And you actually see this guy from time to time on the ground diving for loose balls, making hustle plays. He's a much more complete player than Jokic, and Jokic does a lot of things. This is what I'll say about Jokic, because there's some folks who feel if you say something bad about Jokic or you're not supporting him, you're hating on him. Here's my issue with Jokic. It's not the player, it's the program that he plays for. What Denver has done up to this point with Jokic, it should be damn near criminal. The fact that they have systematically allowed this team to get worse and worse and try to put, they create these cavernous holes in their lineup, and they try to fill them with some damn silly putty, thinking that it's going to be okay. And then when stuff sinks further and further down, they're like, oh, we tried. No, you haven't tried. And the fact that they're talking more and more now about trying to add like an impact player, like Zach LaVine is one of the hot names out there that they may be pursuing. And Zach's a good player. And if it comes at the price of Michael Porter Jr., I'm not sure if that's necessarily going to make you better. You're getting I think a slightly older player. I believe Zach is pretty much in his prime. And Michael Porter Jr. is, I think, 25, 26, something like that. So I'm not sure that's necessarily an upgrade, but they may not necessarily be looking for an upgrade. They may be just looking for just kind of to shake things up a little bit. But to me, Giannis is at the top of the mountaintop as far as MVP candidates because his stats are impressive. His impact at both ends of the floor is undeniable. And his team is winning at a high level. And when that's happening, that to me, that's what embodies being an MVP. Before we go any further, Gary, I want to also give a shout out to our good friends at Game Time. Get great tickets on all types of sporting events as well as concerts. And when I'm thinking about doing a football game or going to a concert, Game Time is where I go first and foremost. And there's so many different aspects of it that Game Time brings to the table that benefit you, the consumer. But for me, the really cool thing about them that I love is the all-in pricing, because look, I want to know what I'm paying before I have to pay. I don't like those gotcha moments. You know what I mean? Game Time app's all-in pricing shows you the total price before you get to the checkout, and you get a panoramic view of the seats that you choose before you get to checkout, so you know exactly what you're looking for. You know exactly what your sightlines are before you actually have to pay for it. And all you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Just again, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off. Terms apply. What time is it? Game time. And it's also time for us to talk about Gary's second favorite coach, because his favorite coach is Joe Mazzulla. His second favorite coach is Doc Rivers, your boy. Doc has, and I touched on this earlier about, just kind of talking about the loss to the Celtics really kind of was almost like a galvanizing moment for his team. And Giannis talked about that after they won the Cup. When you think about the improvement that we've seen in this Bucks team of late, where does Doc Rivers stack up in terms of the credit cake that you give out for their improved play? I mean, does he get the biggest slice? Does he get the second biggest slice? Does he not get a slice at all? Where do you see Doc figuring into their success?
I think 50%, because, he maintained that they were going to be better, that things were going to turn around. He had the confidence in this team to say, hey, guys, listen, keep doing what you're doing. Do not get discouraged about what's happening with us, the losses. We're gonna turn this thing around. They lost a couple of close games to Cleveland. They had some tough situations early in the season. Obviously, losing 3 times to the Celtics in 3 competitive games. Like they were losing close. I mean, and there's a couple of games that they look like they weren't interested in playing. But now I just think they've kind of put it together. I remember they lost to the Celtics, but they lost a home game against Atlanta. And I just think that was one of those games they were like, okay, like we can't lose games like this anymore. We're better than the Hawks. Mm-hmm. And since then, 4 wins in a row, throughout this tournament. But they also ran off and they won at Houston at home. They beat the Bulls, the Pacers, Charlotte. They won at Miami. They beat the Wizards as everybody else does, and they beat your Pistons by 21. So the schedule has not been as difficult until Oklahoma City, and they put Oklahoma City down. They put Oklahoma City out of their misery. That was the worst I've seen the Thunder play in a long time. And you got to credit Doc and you got to credit the Bucks for having the wherewithal to just say, okay, even though we're 2-8, we're not done. Since they're going 2-8, let me do my math here. They're 12-3. It's, and you could say 13-3. But the last game of the play-in tournament doesn't work. The in-season tournament doesn't work. So it doesn't count. No, it doesn't count. Doesn't count. So they're still 14-11. So if I'm Milwaukee, you can get probably the number 2 seed in the East if you really push it. And we'll see that game on Friday against Cleveland. We'll definitely see how that turns out, how they match up with the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers going to come off major rest. We'll see how that game turns out. But they're 8 games behind Cleveland, 6.5 behind the Celtics. So there's still a chance for them to get that 3rd seed. Can they make up 8 games? Anything can happen. It's only December. But I think if you're the Bucks, you're saying to yourself, we just want to get home court advantage in the first round. We'll let our veteran guys handle it from the rest. We don't need home court advantage in the semifinals or the finals. You just try to get that top 4 seed. So I think the Doc deserves a good slice of the pie just for kind of sticking with it, right? Sticking with it, not letting these guys give up on themselves, making some lineup changes, playing A.J. Green more, playing Andre Jackson in a certain role, and not giving up on guys like Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis who got off to really, really slow starts.
Yeah, Doc. I mean, Doc's done a good job. There's no doubt about that. And the thing that I find myself looking at, and you kind of alluded to it, but the schedule has worked out in their favor. They're playing teams that they should be able to beat. And I give them credit. When you start off 2-8, there's a tendency to have some doubts creep in about how good you are, but they haven't allowed that to be a factor, and they've done what they were supposed to. They've beaten the teams that they were supposed to, but OKC was really the one team that they had faced that there was some doubt as to whether they could beat them. And they not only beat them, they beat them like a drum. It was a close game in the first half, but they just blew that thing wide open in the second. And that, to me, shows them starting to realize and understand their ability to separate themselves from most of the teams in the Eastern Conference. And it's good to see because, for a while there, Gary, it looked like it was just going to be like Boston, Cleveland, and a bunch of, folks, just basically hanging around and get that ass whipped. But they actually now, you look at the way Milwaukee's playing, you look at Orlando, what they're doing without one of their key guys, you look at the surge that we're seeing in Atlanta. Atlanta, in a lot of ways, reminds me of Indiana from last year, a team that seems to start making some strides to where, they're progressing in the right way. But I would go a step further and say they're better than Indiana was last year because they have a central guy that they can build around, and they've got a lot of young, talented guys that have all-star promise. The Johnson kid is one I'm thinking of specifically, that they are only going to get better in time. And so Atlanta's a team that I wouldn't want to see them in the first round. Put it that way, whether I'm the favorite team or whether I'm like, if they're in that 4-5 game, which I think they will be, I wouldn't feel good about seeing them in the first round because you really don't know what you're going to get with them. But back to Doc Rivers, though, he's done a really good job. And again, after a horrific start, if there was ever like a comeback coach of the year award, which there never will be, but if there was one for this season, Doc Rivers might be that guy, considering how things played out at the beginning of the season and where they are now. Now, enough talk about former Celtics and former, individuals like that. Let's talk about your Boston Celtics, Gary Washburn, who are playing the Chicago Bulls next. And as you look at the schedule, and I'm sure you've recognized this too, this schedule coming up has the potential for them to do some pretty amazing things. I mean, Chicago is the first of 7 straight games against teams that are sub 500. When you have the second best record in the East and you got a schedule like that coming up, you should be thinking about running the table. You should expect to run the table. I don't think they will. I think they'll have at least 1, maybe 2 slip-ups. But the Celtics could conceivably go on a run and find themselves at the top of the Eastern Conference standings in the next week and a half.
You're right. You're right, Sherrod. You're looking at 2 games against Chicago, 2 games against Indiana, Orlando, who's shorthanded, Philadelphia on Christmas, and then Toronto before you get to the juggernaut kind of tough part of their schedule where they go Minnesota, Houston, Oklahoma City, Denver, which might be their toughest West Coast trip in a while because there is no okay, you can mark this. They should win this one. Like Minnesota is going to be a tough road one. Houston on a back-to-back too. They're going all the way from Minnesota down to Texas for a back-to-back. That's going to be hard. Then Oklahoma City and then Denver, so that's a tough one. Then they come home and they get the tricky Sacramento Kings. So that's not going to be an easy stretch. But you're right, Sherrod. 2 games against the Bulls, 2 games against Indiana, Toronto, Orlando, Philadelphia. You'd like to think they can go 6-1 at least. That you're right. I mean, there could be a slip up there. Indiana's a tricky team. You don't know which Indiana's going to show up. Philadelphia will, I'm sure, play hard on Christmas Day. Orlando's tough at home, and they got guys. Jalen Suggs is playing great ball right now, so they're going to be scrappy. And that game at Chicago, December 21st, a couple days from now, that's going to be a tricky game because they went and kind of had a slugfest with a shootout with Chicago a couple of weeks ago and was able to win, but it was definitely not a convincing win. So you're right; they should be able to go 7-6-1, 7-0. We'll see, but that's a stretch that they should pad their victories and eat very well.
Absolutely. Feasts for sure. And they will obviously, Celtics, even if they don't fully show up, they're still going to show up well enough to win most of those games, if not all of them. I'm convinced of that. And hopefully Kwani Lunis will be back with us next week and show up. And
Kwani and Embiid.
Exactly. Facts. But Kwani, we joke about her when she's here. We joke about it when she's not here. It's all love. And speaking of love, for those of you who are checking us out, whether it's on YouTube or through Spotify or whatever your podcasting app may be, you have a chance to show even more love to us in voting us for the best sports podcast. We've been nominated as a finalist for that award, and fans will be able to vote for us up through January 13th, and they're going to announce the winner on January 30th. So if you've got love for us, which I know all of you do out there, definitely vote for us, and you can do that at www.sportspodcastgroup.com/shortlist-category/ that will be on there'll be in our bios and in our information, and we'll be posting information with that link on all the various channels that our podcast can be seen and heard from. So definitely show us some love and give us that vote. That will be greatly appreciated. And before we wrap, Gary, what you got going on for the holidays? You gonna be at the game on Christmas?
I'll be at the game on Christmas. I'll be home, just hanging with the family. Just getting. Hopefully, it doesn't snow or have any bad weather in Boston. It's a little cool, but it's nice outside. It's been good. It's been manageable. So yeah, just be at home and trying to enjoy the family and count all your blessings, man. Every day there's some things you hear about you don't like, or somebody who's passing on, and unfortunately, and we gotta just be blessed for the days we're here and our family. So instead of focusing on the gifts or what you're going to get, or focus on the family around you and love them as much as you can.
Facts. That's real. I got a little spoiled.
In other words, Sherrod, you ain't getting nothing for Christmas, so focus on family and okay.
Except some coal.
Yeah.
That's all right. I'm cool with that. For Thanksgiving, I was out west.
Yeah, really we all know having chimichangas and
Burritos. And Gary, we're gonna keep the warm holiday vibe going. I'm gonna be in the South for Christmas this year.
Oh wow, okay.
So I fully expect to not deal with snow. I fully expect to be eating non-traditional and traditional Christmas food. So yeah, there'll be some ham and all that, but there's gonna be some other stuff too. Yeah. So probably I might get some Mexican. I'm feeling Mexican lately. Mexican food. I've been on a little Mexican kick lately with my food palate. So, but again, to echo what you said, Gary, I mean, it really is about the people that are in your life, and just really just being thankful for being around for them, and them being around for you. That really is, as we get a little bit older and a little bit more wiser, hopefully, we embrace that reality more so than we did in our earlier years. But before we get out of here, Gary, I want to give one more shout out to our good friends at Prize Picks, exclusive daily fantasy partner of CLNS Media Network, and also our good friends at Game Time, which takes the guesswork out of buying last-minute tickets to your favorite sporting events and concerts. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Hopefully, Gary, next week, Kwani Leonard, Kwani Embiid will be back with us, and then we can keep it going. Yeah, let's do it. All right, strong into the new year. Absolutely. All right, folks, that's it for this edition of the Big 3 NBA podcast. I'm Sherrod Blakely. For Gary Washburn, we are out.